that you've just finished presenting, but I have a question about the presentation. And I'm really intrigued by the use of the word grievance and the definition of the word grievance. From a South African lexicon, if you could maybe explain why that word was selected and what it means in our context in South Africa.
Sure. Well, first, just to say that the global report really kind of takes the lead on our the rollout of our trust reports for Edelman. So the global team, the Edelman Trust Institute, selected the word grievance based on the sense of this idea that institutions have really failed societies over the years. And they felt it was the best sort of all-encompassing description around how people were feeling all of these fears related to their job security, what the future looks like. They're not sure what to believe, what not to believe. Last year, we also reported people feeling very polarized, a polarized society. So this year, I think grievance really sums up the sense of one of the most important stats that I presented in the report, which was using unsanctioned means to drive change, which is really that activism that's coming to the fore. I think as South Africans, we're probably very familiar with the word grievance. We probably feel very aggrieved and have for many years. So I think it's probably part of our kind of colloquialisms here. But globally, I'm not sure that word has ever had the same meaning as it has right now. So that for us is kind of the all-encompassing description.
Dr. Zwane, Stephen?
Yes. Stephen will be fine. Stephen will be fine, thank you.
So the report's findings suggest that the institutional failures of the last 25 years have produced these grievances, not only in South Africa, but across the world. And those with grievances are less likely to trust business, government, the media, and NGOs as well. You're also particularly fascinated by this term, grievance.
Yes, absolutely. I must also say good evening, everybody. I did say to Mandy that I think it gives me good credit to be in the panel that is moderated by her. So I really...
you haven't done anything terrible.
At least I'll call you directly next time. I was very fascinated even when we heard the report about the word grievance, because it's such a big, deeper meaning that I did not think that it represents the way we speak and engage. But as we engage with the data, we realize that it is universality in its meaning, and I think we had to settle down to the understanding and the appreciation. But what has happened over the last 25 years is a big lesson. I want to just talk about us as a country and as a continent. The big lesson is that we over-relied on business, had huge expectations on government, and that disappointment came from maybe we were inactive in terms of taking our roles as society to act on things that we deem important. And I think for me, that's through the lens of a normal man in the streets. And I think if I look at it from the context of business has done a lot to complement what the government isn't able to do, but I don't think we've done enough to communicate that to the broader public in terms of the impact we're making. And also, in addition to that, there's been sponsored interventions by government that have come by the private sector and business to really drive an impact in society. And I mean, I'm looking for the COO for the Youth Employment Service in the room and realize that if there's one thing that we've done differently in the last 5 years was to support, yes, both at the government level as well as a corporate level, and we've created opportunities for young people to believe that there's an opportunity for them and that the future looks bright. So there's a lot of variables, Mandy, when I look at the last 25 years, and I think I'd like to just double-click on some of those as we engage.
One of the interesting takeouts for me has been the fact that government remains the least trusted institution in South Africa at 36%, but there has been an increase in trust in government over the past year, 7% since last year. And the likely cause of this optimism is the government of national unity. But for me, it's about more than that. It's about the collaboration between government and the private sector. And that for me has been one of the really positives over the past 2 years or so is the work being done by Operation Vulindlela on the various work streams of crime and corruption, energy and logistics, and the real progress that we've seen. Refilwe, Discovery, of course, has been crucial to that. Adrian Gore's been very outspoken about the collaboration. He leads the collaboration between government and the private sector. How important has that been for business to step in and collaborate with government?
Yeah, I think it's been, I hope you can all hear me, I think it's been absolutely critical. A lot of what Karena was presenting now speaks to the importance of institutions feeling like they are trying to make things better, feeling like they are not just sort of there to, in business's case, make a profit, but that they understand people like me and that they want to make a difference, they want to make things better for me. And I think that kind of involvement is hugely critical in terms of shaping perceptions of your organizations, which is important because obviously I am in brand. But even more critically, the reality is if South Africa doesn't thrive, there's no business that can thrive, right? And I think what's been wonderful to see is a far deeper appreciation of that by the private sector in general, to the point that Stephen was raising now. And I think it's that sense of, there's an article I read many years ago that said in many ways the role of government has now sort of been handed over to the private sector in some ways, not in all, just because there's a realization that they can't do it alone. And that they need the institutions, including private sector, to get involved. So I think for me, it's those two reasons, right? That no business can grow or thrive if the place where we live and operate is not thriving. And ultimately, if you want people to choose you as an organization for whatever their needs are, they are far less likely to do so if they feel like the relationship you have with them is transactional, as opposed to deeper than that.
And a lot of that, of course, drives sentiment, and that is often crucial to investor confidence,
100%.
to getting growth going in the country, to creating employment. When you look at the grievance, a large portion of that comes from the huge unemployment rates in this country.
Absolutely.
So there is a massive responsibility for government. What do you think is the role then in being part of the solution to the challenges and how you've taken this on in the corporate sector?
I think it's a couple of things, but two that I'll highlight, right? So the one is kind of choosing the lanes where you can get involved and where you feel you can make the biggest difference, right? So really thinking about the skills and strengths that you bring to the table and where you can make the biggest difference. I'm a huge believer in focusing on 3 or 4 things rather than spreading your resources over 20 things. So I think that's a big role in getting involved in solving some of these systemic things. And what's become increasingly important is addressing some of the more pressing immediate ones, because unless we do, it's very hard to focus on some of the very important long-term ones. And I think the other thing is in the way that you do business, right? So what are you doing to make the things that you offer people more affordable, more accessible, more understandable, more relatable? I think that is important. Your chart showed that affordability is a big part of what drives sentiment. What are you doing in terms of how you engage and communicate with people and how you make them feel seen and included, which is hugely important in how you kind of gain sentiment and relevance with these audiences, with all audiences, really.